Hello and welcome to Life Beyond the Numbers, the podcast for people who are curious about how to have a more fulfilling work life. We live in a world largely driven by numbers, logic and reason. But how we feel at work and about our work impacts us, our organisations and society. There is a relationship between the numbers of our organisations and the life beyond the numbers. I'm Susanne Evans, your host. I've lived and worked in many countries. I've met people who love what they do and people who don't, people who bring their full selves to work and people who won't. But one thing that I've learned that is common to us all is that we are all unique and have unique experiences. And it's helpful to know that there are others who think like we do, or have had struggles too, or have gone where we want to go, or can show us things we didn't know. So join me and my guests as we place a lens on the human side of work life by sharing insights, stories and strategies to inspire you to let your uniqueness shine through. Hello and welcome to episode 175 of Life Beyond the Numbers, and this episode is going out on Saturday, May 25th, 2024. Earlier this month, my book launched. Woohoo! It is finally out in the world, making its way throughout the world. And thank you to everybody who has purchased a copy so far, and everyone who has got in touch with me and sent me messages or sent me photos of you with the book. If you have bought it and you've read it, please do leave a review on Amazon if that's where you got it from. And of course, if you've bought it online anywhere else and you have the option or opportunity to leave a review, please do. Reviews are crucial for helping books get out there. I cannot get in touch with every person in the world and ask them to buy this book. But when people are looking for a book and they read some reviews, they might go, this is a book for me. That person sounds just like I do. So please do leave reviews. The book did really, really well on May 13th when the ebook was on sale for 99p or 99 cents, and it got to number one on 3 different categories in Amazon UK, and amazingly enough number 2 in a category in the US as well. So again, thanks to everybody who helped Leading Beyond the Numbers get to the bestseller status on Amazon. It was incredible. It's been a bit of a roller coaster week or two since then, as you can probably imagine. I can hear it in my voice now. My voice is sounding a little bit tired today. I've done a lot of talking. But it has been just a different experience, a really, really different experience, and one I would recommend to anyone. So if you're thinking about writing a book, do it. What are you waiting for? And today I am going to share the book launch, the audio of the book launch. So on Monday, May 13th, I did a LinkedIn Live in the afternoon with Matt Phelan and Dr. Susanne Evans. And Matt interviewed me and Susanne facilitated the conversation and fielded the questions from attendees. And this was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to do. And it's been a lot of fun to listen back to it as well, actually, and listen to some of the questions that I was asked that were really, really quite interesting. So I've barely edited this at all. I took out a couple of words here and there where there was a lot of repetition when we were either answering questions or being asked questions, but mostly I've left it there, true to its form, so you can kind of get the feeling from it or soak up the atmosphere of what it was like to participate in the LinkedIn Live launch if you didn't manage to get there. And if you were there, well, maybe you need to listen to another episode today or find another podcast, or maybe you'd like to listen again. And maybe you didn't hear it all. Maybe you weren't able to attend to the whole thing. One thing I did forget to do that day on the LinkedIn Live was give Susanne an opportunity to introduce both herself and Matt properly. We had set up a run of how the day would go, and once we started, I was like, let's just get going. I was quite hyper. But Matt Phelan is a dad, founder, business advisor, and keynote speaker, as well as being a proud geek, his words, and supporter of decent people. Matt believes that the future of tech is human, and he co-founded the Happiness Index to try and positively shape the future of work in a small but important way. He has written 2 books, Freedom to be Human, The Business Case for Happiness, and most recently, The Happiness Index, Why Today's Emotions Equal Tomorrow's Business Success. And he also hosts the insightful podcast, Happiness and Humans. And I actually saw a post today on Instagram. Today's the 24th of May when I'm recording this, and the Happiness Index turned 10 today. So that's great. 10 years in business, and Matt posted some great reflections about the last 10 years, and his birthday is today too, which coincides with the anniversary of the Happiness Index. And Matt has also been on Life Beyond the Numbers. Episode 67, Better Understanding, went out in December 2021. If you haven't heard that one, it's a really good one to listen to. And Matt also appears in the book. And then Dr. Susanne Evans is no stranger to Life Beyond the Numbers at all, because in fact 2 weeks ago, the episode that went out, episode 174, Variation is the Norm, Susanne interviewed me about my book. Susanne was first on the podcast way back in April 2022, episode 83, The Impact of Change. It's also well worth listening to, and she has some great little nuggets of stories in that episode. Dr. Susanne Evans creates change one story at a time. She's on a mission to change the way transformations are managed within organisations. She founded Feldspar Consulting in 2007 to help her clients lead change in a more human, effective way through her work as an organisational change consultant, trainer, coach, and researcher. She is a storyteller and is writing ChangeStories, how to have powerful conversations, tell inspiring stories, and build engagement for transformation, which is due to be published in November. And she's the host of an engaging podcast called ChangeStories. And I am so grateful to Matt and Susanne for being part of the celebration that took place on May 13th. They made the process so enjoyable and so easy for me, and hopefully for everybody that was there. So I am going to hand over in a moment to that LinkedIn Live and let that play for you. This month in May, I've only put 2 episodes out. They were both book related, but from June we will be back to normal scheduling again. So expect to hear an interview, a conversation with a guest on the first 3 Saturdays of the month, and then the 4th Saturday of the month I will do a solo episode, and if there's a 5th Saturday in a month coming up, there'll be a compilation episode. So we'll be back to normal scheduling from next month, from June. And in the meantime, I hope you enjoy my book launch, and thank you for celebrating along with me. And please remember to leave a review. Just give everybody a couple of minutes to join. I can see people streaming in, and I'm hearing that everything is fixed. I was a bit confused because I've never done one of these LinkedIn Lives before. I mean, what a day to do something like this, just throw it on top of everything else that was going on today. But here we are, and I could see people dialing in from Dublin and Brazil, Northern Ireland, Oxford. Yay. Hello, everybody. You're so welcome. So we'll just give a couple of minutes for everyone to join. I've got my copy of my book here, along with my wonderful companions on screen as well, who are going to show theirs, hopefully. There we go. Yay! Which is brilliant. And yeah, okay, so I can see people are streaming in. That's fantastic. We'll just give it another minute or so, and then we will get started. Hello from Wales. Hi, Robin in Wales. It's brilliant to see you. Thank you. I've been told I'm fine now. That's great. Thanks, Jill. Thank you for that. That's brilliant. And Dublin, hey, Kerry. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'm going to have to stop looking at that screen because I'm just going to get like completely distracted with all these wonderful people appearing on screen.
How many different countries have we got so far?
Oh, at least 5.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'd say at least 5. We've got Ireland, we've got England, we've got Wales, we've got the US, I've seen that. Scotland is there as well.
Cool.
Brazil, that was right, yeah. So, yeah. That's what happens when you spend most of your career working in different countries, like I have. So I've been all over the world, and it's brilliant to see people joining from all over the world as well. Spain, I just see Spain coming in at the moment. Okay, I think we've probably got enough numbers to kick off. And thank you all so much for making time and coming today to celebrate the launch of Leading Beyond the Numbers, how accounting for emotions tips the balance at work. And I can't even explain or describe how I'm feeling today, which is something I talk about a lot in the book. So I should be able to do that. But I'm kind of like having this outer body experience as well as being in my body. And I'm just going to stop rabbiting on, actually. That's probably the easiest thing to do. And instead, I'm just going to introduce my 2 wonderful co-hosts and interviewer and launchers here with me today. To my left, I have Dr. Susanne Evans, and I will let Susanne introduce herself in a moment, but Susanne and I met through the podcast, and Susanne is writing her own book, also being published with Practical Inspiration Publishing. And I met Matt. Oh, a very long-winded story, but it involves another Irish person called Eamon Fitzgerald, who also appears in this book. And when I was writing this book, I thought I have to ask Matt Phelan if he will write the foreword. And Matt, you probably don't realize how long it took me to build up to that, but I eventually got around to it and I did it. And you said yes. And then I went back again and said, will you launch my book? And here you are again. So I'm so grateful for your contribution to this, Matt, and for you being here as well today. Susanne, can I hand over to you, please?
Of course. Hello, everybody. It's a real honour to be here today. I was really chuffed when Susan asked me to help her launch her wonderful book. So what we're going to do this afternoon while we're together is that Susan's going to say a few words shortly. She may read some bits out of the book. We were chatting about that earlier. She's got a few ideas. Then I'm going to hand over to Matt, who's going to do a bit of a Q&A with Susan about the book and what led her to write it. And then at the end of the session, there's some time to take some questions and answers. I'll be moderating that session and just checking to see what's coming in, what questions are coming in, so that Susan doesn't need to worry about it. So any questions or anything that anyone's got, please put them in the comments and in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. So without any further ado, I will hand back to Susan, who is going to say a few words about what's in the book, and then we'll go straight to Matt with his question and answer.
Can we go straight to Matt and kick it off? Is that okay, Matt, if we do it like that? And I can include something, because I think the less I have to like do now, the better.
Yeah, absolutely, Susan. And just as Susanne said, it's just it is an honour to be here and ask these questions. And I think, I don't know if it was planned this way, but it's apt. I think that it's Mental Health Awareness Week. And I think for those that have not read the book, I do think sort of understanding a lot of these subjects in here are really, really relevant. Obviously, there's a huge aspect of this being a business book and stuff we can apply in our careers, but I think for our own mental health, there's so much in this book. But anyway, let's get into the questions, Susan, because we want to hear from you. It sounds like a really blunt question to start with, but why did you even bother? Like, why did you want to write a book? Because it's hard work, isn't it? Writing a book. Like, what made you think, well, why? Like, why did you write a book? Please tell us.
I always wanted to write a book, and that might sound a bit like, oh yeah, okay. But when lockdown happened 4 years ago, I had just started my own business and I knew things were never going to take off. And I thought lockdown would only last a few weeks as well. So I thought, right, what can I do in the meantime? And somebody put me in touch with the wonderful Alison Jones, and I signed up. Alison runs Practical Inspiration Publishing, and I signed up to do a virtual book retreat for 2 weeks. And then I went from there to build out a book proposal. And I did a bit more work on it, and I realized I was never going to write that book, that actually it was an awful book. I didn't want to write it, and that I didn't want my business to be about that either. And it made me revisit everything. But I still wanted to write a book. So 2 years later, in 2022, I went back and I built out another book proposal over 2 weeks with Alison Jones, who runs this fantastic challenge that helps you to get the book thinking out to see, is there a book here? And during that time, in the intervening time, an idea had gripped me that I couldn't let go of. And I had come across the work of a wonderful scientist, psychologist, neuroscientist called Lisa Feldman Barrett, who writes about the brain and emotions. And she used this phrase about body budgeting, which to me spoke to accounting. So I started to talk about accounting for emotions and doing talks around that topic. And from there, I knew I had the bones of a book, and it wouldn't let me go. That idea just wouldn't let me go. So I had to write this book, Almost Matt. It was hard work, but it was also great work. You know, it was fun and enjoyable, and I would recommend it to anyone.
I love it. And I think that one of the things that I find fascinating when people read the pages, it leads to my second question. When I read this book, I feel like you've personally writing to me. That's how it feels, the way it's written. I'm like, oh, it's really nice that you've written me these words, even though I know it's not true. But my question is related to that. Who is the book for them? Because when I'm reading it, I feel like it's for me. But did you have a reader in mind, or is it broad? Is it like your style is that I feel like you're writing to me, but who did you have in mind that the book is for?
I had in mind that the book is for people who manage and lead people first and foremost. And having done a lot of that in my own career, I guess that's where that comes from. And that's how it comes across to you, Matt, reading it, and anyone else that manages people or has managed or led people. So it really is written for leaders of people, team leaders, chief executives, whoever wants to read that book. But to narrow it down, I did keep a couple of individuals in mind so that I always felt like I was speaking to them as I wrote. You weren't one of them, Matt, I'm sorry to say, but...
Thank you for not lying to me and pretending it was.
And yeah, so it was written for leaders. I think it goes beyond that. I think a lot of people that read the book, the early endorsements said, you know, it's for aspiring leaders as well. Susanne, I think you even said everyone should have to read it when they start work. So I think it goes broader, but if you keep a reader in mind, I was certainly writing for leaders.
Yeah. Susan, I'm going to ask you to read a bit out because I do think this is a good start to one of my questions. But if you could just go to page 112, and it's chapter 6, and it's all the title of the paragraph is All in My Head. It would lovely be to hear it in your voice, in your words, that first paragraph.
Sure. I largely ignored the role of emotions or feelings in my life. They were there, but I didn't understand the importance of them. They often seemed inconvenient and best ignored. I took my body for granted and didn't know much about the needs of my body other than the basics.
So why do you feel that you felt these emotions were inconvenient and best ignored?
I was one of these people that would often burst into tears at work in the most inappropriate kind of time, it felt like often. And what I found was that would often shut down the conversation because people would kind of go, oh, you know, Susan got upset or Susan was annoyed with, or no, usually I was upset and people would kind of be afraid of that and not want to keep going with the conversation. Whereas actually I was somebody who was frustrated often, and tears were a sign of that. Now I learned how to manage that part a little bit better before fully understanding the relevance of everything. But I think, you know, I started work in the mid-90s and you just didn't talk about emotions. And certainly when I went into a professional services firm and trainee auditor, I mean, we were meant to be devoid of emotion. And I think it's like a split personality then almost. You condition yourself to believe that I shouldn't bring in any emotions in and that they're dangerous in the workplace or they don't have any place in the workplace. And anyone that is showing emotions is somehow weak or less than. And fortunately, that is no longer the case. Maybe not everyone knows that, but that's certainly the truth.
And what would you say to someone, a CEO, that still believes that's the truth, that emotions should not enter the workforce, Susan? What would you say to someone?
Read my book.
Yeah. Good answer.
No, I would say that there is so much to be gained and leveraged from actually embracing a both and approach. You're already using your emotions at work, whether they're anger or happiness or sadness or joy or whatever it is, motivation. All of these things come from emotions. A decision we make is always going to be based emotionally as well. So we're not just rational actors, we're both and I think there's room for both, and actually embracing that part will pay dividends. If we take, and this is the premise of a lot of the book, but if we take the emotional state of the organization as a proxy for the financial state of the organization, then the happier your people are, the better your results will be. Because when people are enjoying what they do, they're enabled to do their best work, which brings them a sense of achievement and satisfaction and joy and appreciation, and they belong and all of those wonderful things, then that makes a better case for doing business. Who doesn't want to go and deal with people who are happy?
Yeah, totally. You're preaching to the converted on that one, Susan. In terms of the book, if I'm sure your publisher asked you this, and you probably had to get this succinct down, but if you just had to say, what is the book about? How would you describe that to someone that's totally new to this book?
So I suppose what I drew in there was it's both and. So at work, we have this belief, or we've had this understanding that we are rational actors and that we perhaps just go to work from here up. So it's almost like our body doesn't come into it, but there's intelligence to be gained from more than just our brain, and leveraging both and is wonderful. And we should all know more about how our brain and body works, because that is empowering.
Yeah. And that links into a couple of other questions related to that. Obviously, you mentioned you'd always wanted to write a book, and then you had this great process that it sounds like an amazing process to go through, where you rejected a book idea. But like, why? You mentioned the pandemic briefly, but why this book now? Like, why is it so important in 2024?
I think there's more of an appetite for books like this coming out. I mean, your own books, Matt. I remember the conversation we had even on my podcast, and you had written a book, The Business Case for Happiness. It was the book that I would have liked to have written. And that's something you said to me, I remember, is if you had written it, great, I wouldn't have had to. And I think that's why I chose this book, is this was the next piece for me. Well, there are all these different things we can access to learn more about ourselves, from neuroplasticity to sleep to whatever it is. But not everyone has time to read a full book on each of those individual topics. So my idea was to give an introduction, a brief about a lot of these really amazing things that are being discovered about how we work as people at the moment, and put it together in one place. And then if people want to explore more, they're more than welcome to.
Yeah, so it's like an atlas. It's just like a starting point from all the subjects to navigate around.
Yeah.
That's really great. And I hate it when people ask this question, but I'm going to ask it because, again, you said around time. People are time poor, aren't they? And there's going to be some people that will read the book, and there's some people that join today, and they want to know what are the takeaways, Susan? If I had to push you for 4 takeaways, what would you give us?
So I guess the easiest one, I think, is we've got a seesaw. Right? I mean, that's kind of what it's meant to be. And so in the last chapter of the book, I do come up with an acronym for a seesaw. And the C part of it, SEE, is sleep, eat, and hydrate, and exercise. So the 3 fundamentals that we all need to do. I'm not even going to talk about those. I don't need to. And the soul part is sense making, which is about using more of our senses to make sense of the world we're in, but also about some sense making within organizations and for ourselves. The A is for awareness, and that is just about having more self-awareness. I certainly spent a lot of time thinking I was being more self-aware by being more aware of others. But I actually still had a lot of work to do on myself to develop my own self-awareness. So I think we can sometimes think that because we see somebody, we understand what's going on for them, but actually the work starts with ourselves, the awareness. And then that all brings wisdom, which is the W. So the more we understand about ourselves and how we work in the world, the more wisdom we have. But I think the key takeaway, so that's the seesaw acronym, the key takeaway for me really is about variation. And variation is the norm. And I think if it comes to organizational reform, this is something that we all really need to take on board, that how we perform varies from person to person, how we learn varies from person to person, how we make decisions varies. And we've spent a lot of time designing structures around one size fits all. And of course, we have to do some things in common. I'm not advocating for throwing everything out, but I think understanding the variation within and between people is really, really key. And there's also then a variation to what you see on the outside and what's going on in the inside. I mean, here today, I am like bubbling up with excitement. Inside, I am shattered.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely so tired, but I'm also elated. You're not seeing what's going on in the inside. And I think we often take for granted that what we see is what we get. And I don't think that's the truth at all. And it's something that we need to check with people what's going on rather than making assumptions.
I think there's a follow-up question in there, Susan, as well, which is, I think the more you sort of read on this subject, you realize that human beings are emotional beings, not necessarily truth speakers at work. And what the place that starts with yourself. And at the happiness index, we have a question that we ask, we get our teams to ask each other, which is the story you tell about yourself more important than the truth? And I think that's a fascinating point there. If we even go back to the bit that you read out, which is I largely ignored the role of emotions or feelings in my life. So if you're ignoring certain things that your body's telling you, you may not even know the truth about yourself. Have you found yourself in that scenario at all, where you don't feel like you're telling yourself the truth?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it usually comes to the physical side of, being tired and pushing through. and just saying, I can do this. I'm going to work harder. Somehow that's going to solve the fact that I'm tired. So it's often things like that overriding those natural bodily requests to have a break or some fresh air. And I still have to keep myself in check, Matt. That's a work in progress, but I think that's part of being human.
Yeah. And that leads up then to, this is my favorite question I'm looking forward to asking you, which it'll be fascinating to get the answer to this, which is, did you actually enjoy writing this book?
How do I answer that one? I did. There's probably people laughing now somewhere in the audience, but I did. I had a wonderful time, and I also had an absolutely terrible time altogether. So it was both, and there were days when I was in flow, and that was phenomenal to sit at my computer with earplugs in. I would have some sort of classical music on, or beta wave brainwave music on, to just stay focused. And those days were just joyful. And there were times when I wrote sentences and I was like, wow, I can't believe that came out of me. Like, where did that come from? That's just beautiful. And then there were days when I wanted to just run away. And there was, like, especially figuring out how to use the balance sheet without any numbers nearly drove me insane. Because obviously, as a person who worked in accounting, the balance sheet has numbers in it, end of. And I sat here trying to figure out how to repurpose the balance sheet and create graphs without using numbers. And one day I enlisted my partner. I'm very lucky because he also works in accounting and finance to help me with this and to bounce ideas off. And he went away to work and he came back 4 hours later, and I was just sitting there like, I just can't do this. So often there was a real mental battle with the work, and why is anyone going to read this? Huge self-doubt. But the good days outweighed the bad. And once the momentum really took force, then that brings momentum with it. And it was a joy.
There's a follow-up question there, on the self-doubt. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I remember reading someone's in my head, I speak to myself worse than anyone I've ever met in my life. Some of the things that I say to myself, I swear at myself quite regularly, all these things. Self-doubt, how do you balance the two of what you said, Susan? Because obviously you're trying to listen to your body. So if it's saying, you know what, you shouldn't put yourself in danger, or you need to go and have a sleep, but also your body might be saying, run away, just don't touch this thing. So how do you know what parts to listen to? Because how do you do that? Because we all have that voice, don't we, saying don't do it. But how do we make sure that we know that the voice that's saying take a rest is different to the one that's saying you can't do this?
Well, I had the privilege, or have the privilege, of having a podcast, Life Beyond the Numbers. And I've spoken to so many people about this kind of thing. And there was one guest in particular, Chris Lantham, and I thought she just really put it so succinctly by saying, the annoying voices are usually on repeat. They're saying, don't do this. This is going to be crap. No one's going to read it, over and over again. So at some point you can just kind of go, enough now, please stop. But then the quieter one, which is often, for me at least, doesn't sound like anything. It's almost like a knowing. So there was a knowing that I was going in the right direction. I started to have a ritual every day as well, so that I would start with the same process that would get me into writing. And one of the things I used to do was listen to a David Whyte poem called Start Close In, which is always about taking the first step, not the second one or the third, but the first one, the one you don't want to take. And it was also, okay, I've got to do this. And the other thing I did every single morning without fail was wrote on top of the page, KISS. And it wasn't keep it simple, stupid, but keep it simple, Susan. And I kept coming back to that, to keeping it simple. And once I had that as okay, I can do this. I can write simply, or simply write, whatever it is, that I would just take off. And like I said, the first few weeks, the battle was worse. It got a bit easier, but every time I sent it out for anyone to read it, then that self-doubt would creep back in again.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it goes away. And I don't think it's a bad thing, because it means we care.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's such good advice, Susan. And it'd be good if we could, that if we get time, it'd be good to revisit that poem as well. By the way, I've got 2 more questions. We're going to go to Q&A. But if people are thinking of questions, put them in the chat or write them down now, because you will get an opportunity to ask them. So start popping in the chat as we go. This is sort of a big, long legacy question, but what do you want the impact of the book to be?
At the moment, the Gallup polls, and you may or may not agree with these polls, but I'm just going to use that as an example. So Gallup say that 20% of the world's workforce are engaged at work, and therefore 80% are disengaged. So it means that people go to work, they just show up, they put in the hours, and they're not doing their best, but they're also not getting the best for themselves or for anyone else. What I really want is to disrupt this pattern. And my dad put it really well when he said a seismic shift in how we go to work. And that's what I'm looking for, Matt, is that we have a seismic shift. And this, along with other books that are addressing this, really start that conversation about how can we do this differently? Because really, if we had 80% of people being engaged at work, showing up, doing their best, feeling like they belonged, feeling like their contribution mattered, their voice mattered, and all of that, I mean, the impact for them at work, for their employer, would be beyond that, because it's not just the workplace, it's where we go after work. It's home to our families, it's into our communities, it's up to society and the world more greatly. And I do think that it can make a difference. I think the world is a really unhappy place. And if we look at the unhappiness of the world versus the unhappiness at work, there has to be a linkage there. Maybe the researchers will say we need more research. Well, go and do it.
No, I love, and just to hear the passion in your voice there, Susan, it's amazing to hear. And that makes me lead to this next question, right? There's loads of us, we're all reading this book. Suzanne's got hers, I've got mine. I'm sure, hold up your book now if you have managed to get an early copy. What can we do to help to spread that word, Susan?
Amazing. So you can read the book, first of all, and tell others about it. But actually, what I think is more important than that probably is leaving a review after you have read it, because it's easy for us here. I've got lots of friends joining, and you know, there's people in LinkedIn community, but actually the review on Amazon or wherever it is you buy your books, especially online, leaving a review will point the book to other people who are like you and who will also get a lot from this book. And I think that's really important. And yeah, spreading the word. I mean, I've done a bunch of Seth Godin workshops over the years, creative workshops. And for anyone that's heard of Seth will talk about how ideas spread. And I think that's what it's about. It's all well and good to write a book, but I don't want it just sitting on a shelf and these ideas not spreading. And the only way an idea will spread is if other people take up the gauntlet and help spread the word with me. I cannot do this alone.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Let's get those reviews on there, people. And Susan, just 2 sort of like technical questions at the end. Are you, and I'm just going to go from I'm going to go out of the unbiased bit. Are you going to be doing an audio version of it? And 2, if you are, can it please be in your voice and not an actor's? Because I think you've got such a unique way of putting things that I think if it was an actor reading out your book, I just don't think it would be anywhere as good. So is there an audio version coming in the future?
I haven't done it yet. I have had lots of requests, and kind of for the similar reason that you've just said there, Matt. A lot of people tell me that I have a lovely voice to listen to. And amazingly, a lot of people who've read the book already have said they feel like I'm there speaking to them as they read. And none of one else could carry that off, Matt. No one. So
Yeah.
yes, there will be an audio book, and it will be me. I promise you that. I have an audio engineer lined up to help with all of that. I just haven't done anything on it yet. But I expect that it will be out later this year or early next year.
Awesome. And this is the final question. This is the acid question. Would you write another book?
Of course.
Wow, that's good. That's quick. That's quick.
I haven't got one ready yet, but I mean,
Yeah.
I think this process of writing, you know, I think back to school, right? And my English teacher, when I was about 14 or 15, told my parents that Yeats would turn in his grave if he heard how commonly I described his poetry with such common language. And I had this thing always that I couldn't write. And so it chased me around that I couldn't write, this voice in our heads, you know, that's planted there. But doing this process, obviously I can write. That was one thing I learned. But it also opened up this creative channel that I never had access to do before. And so I now write poetry most days, which is something I never ever did before. And I haven't had much chance to write recently because it's, well, other than LinkedIn posts and all of that kind of stuff, but proper writing. And one day, I think last week, I sat down to write and it just brought me so much joy. So yes, I can imagine that I'm only 50, I can imagine that there will be at least one more book in me. Let's hope.
That's good. I've got to squeeze an extra little mini question in then on that. This is this thing that I've thought about your podcast and podcasts. Do you feel the same as this? Because I always feel like when you record a podcast or you write a book, even if you didn't publish it, 90% of it is actually being useful because you've gone through a process. So this is more of a question for the people that are listening that don't want to publish a book. But actually, you mentioned the creative process. I would say even if I hadn't published my book or done podcasts, even if they didn't go live, the process is really good because it's a way of getting stuff out. You're nodding, so I think you're going to agree. But any thoughts on that, like that creative process bit you touched on?
Absolutely. And I think there's something about sharing as well that spurs you on a little bit further, you know, because we all carry fears. Absolutely. And often we're afraid of being rejected or getting criticism or something negative coming at us. And I think that stops some of us from sharing. But when you do, and it's met with like this conversation we're having right now, even, there's something incredible in that. And I gain so much from the podcast. I really do. And I can see my journey in stepping stones almost through that as well. And I gained so much from writing this book. I would encourage anyone that is in any way interested in writing or speaking or whatever, just do it. There are 9 billion people on the planet. You know, anonymity is really not your problem, or is your problem more than anything else. You'll be lucky if like the 0.00000 whatever percent actually ever listens or reads, but you as a person will gain so much.
Wow, Susan, I've taken enough time with these questions. Firstly, I just want to say I'm thankful that I've met you, and two, this is an absolutely brilliant book, and I love it. And I want to hand back to Susanne because we want to start getting some more questions in. But thank you for answering those questions. Incredible book.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you for writing the foreword. When Matt rang me about the foreword, he was like, I've got this idea for the foreword, Susan. What do you think? And I was like, crap, why didn't I think of that? So thank you, Matt.
I mean, that could be another 7 books we could do together on just that bit. So I hope people enjoy that. But thank you. It's an incredible book.
Thank you so much, both of you. Great questions, Matt. I think it's really insightful to see Susan's creative process. You'll be pleased to hear there's a huge amount of support for you doing an audiobook, Susan, in the chat. So that has to happen. That has to be next on your list. Everyone wants to hear it. Everyone is insistent that it has to be in your voice. So that's your next job.
When anyone wants to sponsor that, please let me know.
When you've had a chance to put your feet up, you can start thinking about that. Just a reminder to everybody who's here. So the ebook is currently on sale for 99p or 99 cents on Amazon, and then the real life book comes onto the market tomorrow. So don't forget, if you haven't bought it already, it's the best 99p you'll spend today.
And the amazing thing is that this book reached #1 in 3 categories on Amazon today. So bestseller in 3 categories. So thank you to everyone who has bought a copy. You have no idea how grateful I am.
It's an amazing achievement, but as so well deserved. As Matt said, it's a wonderful book, and I really do think it's going to create change in the workplace, much needed change. So I'm going to open the floor now to people. If you've got any questions, please do pop them in the chat and I can ask them to Susan, or I'm not sure, are we able to have people popping up on screen, Susan, to ask them? I can't see anyone else, but
neither can I.
Put them in the chat.
Time I've done a LinkedIn Live, it wasn't the best time to start, and I have no idea, but hopefully people will drop them in the chat.
I can see some questions coming in. So first of all, we've got a question from Greg Vanarek. I hope I pronounced that right. He's asking, what were the 3 categories that you came top in today?
Let's just see. So there was business, management and leadership, occupational, psychology and something, and organizational. I can't remember. Maybe if Alison is there, she'll be able to drop that into the chat for us. I know Alison is on, but it's in 3 categories. If you look at the book on Amazon, it should list it further down, but there, I know I was beside Amy Edmondson for one, and Stephen Covey in another, and so it was pretty cool.
I saw that today. That was very cool. Very, very cool. Perfect. Okay, next question. James Perry. What was the most challenging chapter to write and why? Great question.
Wow. So I would say, or for me, I would say the most challenging chapter to write was accounting for the body at work. So part 2 is about human beings. And that's the part 2's title. And it's accounting for the brain at work, accounting for the body at work, and reconciling brain, body, and behavior is the 3rd chapter in that section. And accounting for the body at work, I found really, really difficult, probably because of the introductory paragraph I read myself there earlier with Matt. But I wanted to feel everything myself. I wanted that sense of embodiment that I actually, whatever I put in the book, I experienced. And some of those concepts are harder to grasp than the other, because I write about something called polyvagal theory. I write about the heart. I write about a host of different things. And I wanted it to be real and experienced and experiential. But also it's quite technical. So a lot of it is quite technical. And I had sworn to myself to keep it simple, Susan. So it needed a lot of iterations and iterations. And that was something, even when it went out to the beta readers, James, that came back with, this needs to be simplified more and this is difficult to understand, which was great feedback to get. So that took a lot of work for me.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got another brilliant question from Nikki Hill here. Were there any specific instances where you had personal breakthroughs or realizations about the profound impact of emotions on leadership effectiveness? Great question.
I think that I might be stuck for words, Nikki Hill. That would be a first. I think along the way, before I ever wrote this book, I guess I was having those breakthroughs myself, and it was reflecting back on those. But I think there's a few graphs in the book, and what I've done with the graphs is try to show the impact on people who have slept 8 hours versus sleeping 6 hours, and what that can do to decision making or being in a meeting. There's a graph where 8 people are in a meeting and they're afraid of the person who's leading the meeting, and you can imagine their emotions going like that throughout the meeting. And I think being able to see things in a graphical form like that makes a difference. So people take information in so many different ways, the variation again. And while the words are so easy for some of us to understand. Actually, the words being alongside some graphs can perhaps hammer it home a bit more. And some people might respond well to that. And it might just shift the way you think about things. And that's what I'm hoping. And that's why those charts are there. One of my favorite pieces in the book, I don't know if I'm allowed to have favorite pieces, but one of my favorite pieces in the book is at the beginning of chapter 8, which is, and it's called a corporate body, where I come up with a metaphor, well, a corporate body corporate, and I change it to being a metaphor of the body. And what if the leadership team was the head? And then you can assign whatever you like to the rest of the body, different parts, different departments. And thinking about, well, you know, if I lose a limb, what's the impact of that on the organization? And are leaders in the dark by being inside in a skull when they can't see anything, and they're dependent on everyone to make sense of what's going on in the world, much like our brain is. I'm not saying the leaders are the brains in every organization, just in this metaphor here. So I'm hoping that there are some different examples that create those breakthroughs for people. But for me, that was like a breakthrough metaphor where I thought, wow, this is a great way to think about an organization.
I found that section really interesting too, actually. I think you hear that as a phrase that's used a lot, but it's to think about it in that different way, I found really interesting. And also you mentioned earlier the graphs. For me, that was one of the things that really stood out in this book. I hadn't seen anything like that before. And I think it's really interesting to think about things and present things in a different way. It illustrated to me your approach to this, that kind of the both rather than the and or, which you've talked about before, that you can be both financial and emotional. It goes to that you don't have to be one or the other. And I know that's your thing. And I think for me, that's one of the things I really admire about you, is you're able to sit in both camps very comfortably, which is to be admired. Okay, we've got another question here from Helen Joy. What do you think are the main reasons people don't open up about their emotions in the workplace, and how would you suggest that they start?
So I think we've just been told not to. And when we're not practicing anything, we're usually not very good at it. So if we're not practicing how to use our anger in the right way, then our anger will come as an outburst. If we're not used to practicing how do I handle this situation, this what we might call difficult situation, in a comfortable way when it is uncomfortable, we just want to shut it down. So we've got all of these feelings going on inside us, and we're like, I just don't want to have to deal with that. I want to shut it down. When actually, we need to go through these things, and the only way we can go through them is by practice. And sometimes it's thinking about, well, what's the worst that can really happen here? But it's also the thing that I say in the book, and I firmly believe this, is if I put my focus on the person that's in front of me, then I will stop thinking about myself and all of these uncomfortable feelings. And we are far stronger and more capable than we ever give ourselves credit for. We all are. We're amazing, incredible human beings. And we can harness the power of our emotions to use them in the right way. But it's like anything. We get better. Doesn't mean it'll get easier, but we can get better.
Amazing. Okay, here's a good one. This might test you. Jennifer Farrelly, great question. Given your educational experience, including our training as an accountant, what would you add to the professional training for our emotional well-being?
Ooh, well, one of the things I thought was brilliant was the science of well-being. So it's a course that you can do it online. I know that it's a Yale course, or I think it's Yale anyway, but you can do this online. And it's one of the most popular courses ever in that university. So the science of well-being, and you can learn a lot by doing it. It's 6 weeks, it's online, it's really, really easy. And I think that's a great place to start. And the other thing I think is we often don't need to do training. We just need to trust in ourselves and practice things. And maybe you can do it with somebody, saying, you know, I'm going to have a go at being more patient in front of somebody, or more understanding, or more curious when I go into this meeting? And then I'm going to tell you afterwards how it went. So it's like setting yourself up to work on things. I think the thing about it is when we learn to swim, because I had to relearn how to swim. So it meant unlearning a lot of old habits that were not really helpful. But if I tried to change everything at once, I would forget to breathe. And obviously you can't swim if you can't breathe. And I think it's a bit the same with this. Don't try and correct everything at once or fix everything. We don't need to fix or correct. We just need to move the dial a little bit and pick something that you would really like to feel differently about yourself and work on that. And then another one, and so on, like that. I have a long way to go, don't worry. I mean, this is a work in progress forevermore, and I constantly catch myself out going, oh my God, how did you respond to that? And I think that's the other thing. It's practicing responding rather than reacting, if you can.
Great answer. Very good. So we've had some questions about whether there'll be a recording. I've put a quick note in the comments to say, yes, this is being recorded. So if you missed a bit or you had to duck out, then there will be a recording, which Susan, you'll put onto LinkedIn or on your website or something, I assume.
Yeah, and I will probably put it out as a podcast episode as well at the end of May.
Great. So I saw earlier there was a question from David Lee. Hi, David. But for some reason, I can't see it anymore. It's disappeared off my screen. I don't know whether you can see it on yours, Matt, or Susan, if you can see it in the comments on your side of the screen. But somehow it's disappeared.
I'll have a quick look here.
I have another question in the meantime. So
I can't see David's question. No, sorry.
I've asked him to ask it again. So maybe he will. Hi, David, anyway. Another question from Greg Van Rek. What did you learn about choosing a good publishing partner that's author friendly and market savvy, and about promoting your book after putting in so much effort, so much change in the publishing industry? So unfortunately, Alison's had to leave at the call, but there may be other people from Practical Inspiration Publishing here. But any comments on choosing a good publishing partner?
I think, like anything in life, if you're choosing a partner, make sure it's somebody you're going to get on with and that you're going to enjoy working with, and that you feel you can speak to at any time, that you can say, I don't understand what to do here, or help me out, but also to share in the joy. So it's really about finding the people who get you. And I think that's what I found with Alison Jones and Practical Inspiration Publishing. Was Alison has a very personal touch, and she wants to make sure that her authors are understood. And I always felt understood. And in fact, like, I remember when the development editor, so the first round of editing that went through, the book went to a development editor, and this was early enough on. And that person's words kept me going throughout the writing process as well, because I felt seen and heard and understood. And I think that's a testament to Alison as well, and the people that she surrounds herself with. So my advice would be, if you're in the market for writing a book, find the people that you want to be in a partnership with, like anything else in life.
Yeah, and I think I would second that. My book's also being published with Alison's team, so I have a vested interest. But yeah, it's about finding that team who get you and get what you're trying to say. So David said his question's already been answered, so we weren't ignoring him. He deleted his question, so just thought I'd check. I can't see any more questions in the chat. If anyone's got anything burning they want to ask, now is the time. Otherwise, I will hand back to you, Susan, to finish off, and we'll close this book launch out. So over to you. Anything that you wanted to add at the end?
I just want to say thank you to everyone who showed up here today in whatever form. I mean, it's such an honor that people are choosing to spend their time here with me and with us. And I'm really, really, really grateful. And if you haven't bought the book yet, what are you waiting for? You can get the ebook for 99p or 99 cents on Amazon, pretty much anywhere in the world. I know some people have had issues with getting copies today, but hopefully that got sorted out. And buy another version if you like as well. And if I ever meet you, I'll be happy to sign it. I trained in Deloitte with a bunch of wonderful people, and there were 9 women in my intake, and we're still in touch. And we have a WhatsApp group. And this morning, the support I got from that group was just incredible. They've all bought a book and they're like, you have to come and sign it. So that's a brilliant opportunity now to get together with people and do a book signing. And send me photos of you with the book. Write to me and tell me what you thought of the book. Leave a review and tell others about it too. Matt and Susanne, thank you both so much for today. I'm really, really grateful that you were both here, and thanks for putting me through my paces, Matt. And Susanne for facilitating this and keeping all the technology side at bay from me for this. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure and an honour, as Matt said, to be part of it.
Yeah, absolute pleasure, Susan. You should be really proud of what you've done.
I am. Thank you. And with that, I am going to end the stream part of this. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the paths we traversed on today's episode. If something rang through for you, be sure to let me know. Or maybe you can share this with someone in your life who would benefit from listening too. And if you enjoy helping others, I'd be so grateful if you would leave a review, so that people who might also be curious about their own life beyond the numbers can discover this podcast too.